is my story. As we talked about our vision is for Coffee County, we wanted you to hear what God's doing in Coffee County, and we want you to hear the stories of the people who sit around you in these chairs and come to our church and who are in our community. And so we want them to share with you everything that God's doing in their life. And so in between those series, I'm going to interject these stories so that you can be encouraged and so that you can see what God's doing through us as well. And so it's strategic in doing that. When I first started thinking about this, I was thinking about the fact that growing up, hearing people's testimony was a big part of the church. And so I wanted to say, how can we do that and let people hear what God is doing? And so this is my attempt to do that, is for us to give regular testimonies about God's faithfulness to us. So today, we're going to hear the story of Greg Woodward. Many of y'all know Greg and are good friends with him. Some of you may not know Greg, but Greg had an accident just back in October, and we want to talk about how that accident has impacted his life and how God's used it to grow him closer to his family and also to the Lord as well. So if you would put your hands together, I'm going to invite Greg to come meet with me up here. He's moving a little slow because of the accident, but that's okay. I was joking with him, and you want me to help you up the steps? Yeah, really. So this is a bit unscripted, so we have met and talked about it, but we do want it to be a conversation. So hopefully you don't mind just listening to us have a conversation. Greg and I have been friends for in the first service. In our first conversation, I didn't realize they have been a part of Grace Point for 12 years. And that has gone by really fast. And Greg has been a good friend, but he's also been a mentor. Greg was willing to come sit down and talk with me, him and another CLC member, which is our church leadership council, about some things that I wasn't doing as well as I should. And so, you forgot about that?
I didn't know you. We good? Blake? Check. Okay.
Okay, mic check. So, he's just been a good friend, mentor, just a person that I really respect as a leader, and has just a wonderful family. There are things that happen at Grace Point all the time where ministry is going on. Even last night, I was praying for somebody who was doing ministry in our community. Yesterday morning, we had people building a wheelchair ramp. There are all kinds of things that happen that are Grace Point that are sometimes, I was thinking about how to say it, organized, and sometimes they're not disorganized, but they're unorganized. And so I'm thankful for that. And Greg and Allison do that at our church on a regular basis and say thank you for y'all's ministry. And they have three wonderful kids, I guess 4 now. Carter and Lauren, because they got married. You'll hear a little bit about that story. And then Claire and Evie, their daughters, and just a wonderful family, incredible kids. And so let's start with this, Greg, because we want to hear from you. When we think back to October, won't you give us the lay of the land? What was going on in your life before this this accident that led to some change in your life? So let's talk about where things were. Where were you spiritually? What was going on in your family's life as we approach the date of your injury?
Okay, well, prior to the injury, I would say that my relationship with God was pretty stagnant. Not that I was far, far away from God or, in some kind of habitual sin or anything like that, but just from the fact of not really acknowledging Him on a day-to-day basis and kind of just living my life, day to day. And I had my own program. I had my own schedule, sole provider. So business is important to me. I got to provide for my family, that kind of thing. And so I think I got to a point where, I knew I was saved. And I really wasn't concerned about, going to hell or anything like that. And my family was intact, and, our marriage is wonderful and all that. But I just really was at a point where I was on cruise control almost, and taking things for granted.
Has anybody ever been on cruise control in your life? Yeah, going through the motions. So we've all been there. And one of the things that you and I were talking about that I heard another pastor say that I think is true is that we have three things really work God uses to change your life. One is a powerful truth. The other is a meaningful relationship. And then there are the pivotal circumstances. So this is a pivotal circumstance.
Or non-pivotal. It doesn't
yeah,
pick much.
yeah. A pivotal circumstance that ended up changing your life. So let's talk about that Friday where everything fell apart.
Good times, yeah, literally.
Literally, so.
Okay, it was Friday, October the 5th, and Carter and Lauren were getting married the next day, and so kind of a typical morning, get up early, get started. I got a lot of my work done by 10 a.m., and Carter had a couple jobs around the house that I was helping him with, and we did that pretty quickly, and the night before we had been working at the venue trying to get everything ready. Archie was designing all the stuff there, so I don't know how much help I was doing, but I thought I was doing some help. Anyway. So we got done there, and I called Archie. I said, "Hey, are you ready for me to come up?" And he said, "No, I got this. I'll be done by the time you get here." So
I know what you mean on that. Archie's
yeah,
like
he's
that.
pretty efficient. Unfortunately,
if you don't know Archie, he's on staff and he's a workhorse, and
he was too efficient that day.
He's very efficient.
Yeah,
but I like that as that's a good thing.
Yeah. So anyway, I had about an hour, and I got a little. Actually, it's not really ours. He adopted us, but it's a basset hound, and I love him dearly, so he and I go riding out in the country a lot, and so I decided we'd walk through the woods that day for a few minutes, and kind of one thing led to another. I really didn't have any major plans, and so I said, well, I'll check this one deer stand that Carter and I had put out last year, and so I climb up. It's got a 20-foot set of sticks to the platform, and I climb up, all good. And normally I wear my safety harness, right, but this was unplanned.
One time.
Yep, for the one time, yeah. And anyway, there was a nice big oak branch. I needed a little bit more to get on the platform, and I grabbed it, and it was completely rotted. So that was a bad moment. I tried to grab the ladder and realized that I was going to fall 20 feet, and it was probably going to hurt. Anyway, so I was telling myself the whole time, okay, drop and roll. You got this. And the drop part worked, but the roll part didn't work so good.
They always say it's not the falling that gets you. It's the way.
That sudden stop.
That sudden stop.
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, at that point, I knew something bad was wrong. I mean, the snap was pretty loud, and pain was pretty bad. So I rolled over, and I called Carter, and I said, hey, do you remember where this stand is? And yep. So unfortunately, it was about 200 yards away from where he could come get me. So I'm crawling through the woods with my leg popping behind me. And my dog, I'm trying to call him because he was chasing rabbits or something. I don't know. But I think the Lord gave me all that to kind of keep my mind off of it. I'm thinking, okay, tomorrow's the wedding, so I don't need poison ivy, so I'm looking out for poison ivy. I'm really allergic to that. That would have been really hideous. But anyway, made it through, and Carter come and got me. And then he had a buddy, one of his groomsmen, Kane. He was there. He always calls me Pops. Well, bald-headed, now I got a stick, so I look like Pops.
And gray hair.
And I do have a gray beard, yeah. So anyway, so I'm old. But that was kind of it. Then we headed to the ER. I called Gary Wood on the way, PA. He's one of the parishioners here. But anyway, Gary said, Greg, if it's what I think it is, you're not going to be able to get any help here in Douglas because we don't do calcaneus fractures. So get to the ER, get some Demerol in me pretty soon, and then did all the x-rays and CT scans. Then the doctor tells me I've got a broken left foot. Well, I knew my right foot was broken. It was pretty obvious. Do we have pictures?
Yeah. Let's take a look at the pictures.
We didn't put the really, really bad ones in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're squeamish, no, they're actually not bad.
So that was with Demerol there. I was really good at that point. And that one's kind of a weird picture. You can't tell how swollen it is. Maybe the next one. There you go. You can see a little green now. At the end of that day, it just looked like a big fat club on the bottom of my leg, so it was not pretty. But there we go.
Yeah,
that gives you a good idea what the calcaneus is not supposed to look like.
Yeah, this is the moment when you guys showed me the X-rays of the ER, and I'm not a doctor, but I could tell that was broken.
That's supposed to be one piece after the arch there, so that's kind of gives you an idea how bad it was.
I think we've got a couple of more as well.
Yeah, there you go. Here's another good one. But
Ouch.
Yeah, unfortunately, my tibia and they call it the talus bone, which is in the center, it both came down on my calcaneus and shattered it in 5 pieces. So that's kind of the scope of the injury. along with my left foot. I did break the talus bone in this foot and another bone. So it wasn't fun.
Yeah, that's rough. So, you know, it's amazing to me too in recall. You know how you remember the fall, and we're thinking through it. And so, as you have the injury, there was one thing you haven't told us yet, but and it's on the spiritual side of what God placed in your mind at the moment. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was a verse that came to me immediately when I was in that pain. And it's Psalms 91:1. He who dwells in the shadow of the Most High will... Who dwells... Can you put that on the...
He's so nervous. He has his down.
Yeah,
He's
I know what it means, or I know what it means to me. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. And at that moment, in that pain, it was like God was telling me, okay, I got this. You know, it's going to hurt, but I'm here with you. So, and the interesting thing about that was, of course, I read it, but what meant so much to me was a gentleman that I knew years ago. It was burned in a bad grease fire from his hips down. And he told me that that's the verse that came to his mind. It was just interesting that that was the first verse that came to my mind. And it was like God was saying, okay, you remember I had him? I got you now. So,
well, you know, what does it tell us that, you know, a lot of times, you know, we look at Bible study, memorizing Scripture, getting to know the stories of the Bible as this chore, this thing we got to check off. Well, what does it say to us as believers that, you know, in those moments when life is kind of falling apart, things are difficult, that if we have taken, you know, the psalmist says, I've hidden your word in my heart, that God resurfaces those things in those moments. You know, and so, you know, that's why we, you know, have the word of God. One of the ways that God speaks is that through his word to us. And so it's important for us to remember that. So what did that verse, what did it mean to you? I mean, think about it like this. It's all those years before, guy goes through a difficulty, and then all of a sudden God, like, you know, finds that on file in your mind and brings it up in that moment. That's pretty incredible.
It was incredible because, you know, it's not like I had been in the Word every day all the time and really was, you know, digging deep at that point. And it was basically, I knew at that moment that was God, the Holy Spirit in me just saying, okay, look, here I am. You're going to have to rely on me now a lot. And, you know, it was kind of like a validation of salvation, but also of a relationship with him. And I think a lot of times we go through, you know, if we're reading the Bible or whatever, and you feel like God is, something just caught your mind, or, you know, wow, that's impressionable to me. You need to go back and read it again, because I think God's going to bring that up at certain moments of your life and say, you remember when you read this, and then it really means something later at a certain circumstance.
So when you and I were talking about this event, you talked about the fact that this was, you know, you had a powerful truth, and then this is a pivotal circumstance. And you talked about the fact that in your mind you knew immediately that things were going to change, that this was going to be, I wrote it down, that this was going to be a new normal. So
yeah, that was something that Allison coined for me. You know, I didn't know this until after the accident, but Allison and Evie were driving to the hospital because I was riding with Carter, and she was like, "This does not leave this car." But why would he go out in the woods the day before? You know, the day before wedding. No, I kind of got off track with that.
You know why that would happen? Because we're men.
Yeah, that's exactly
as a matter of fact, Connor and I were having this conversation. We have recessed lighting in our house, and then we have a area where the sink is, and it's kind of a stationary, I guess, cabinet like in the middle. It's an island, and so the only way I can get to some of the lights is to put a ladder on top of it. And so Connor's looking at me. I'm up on top of the ladder, and he said, This is why men don't live as long as women.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the next slide I let him get.
There you
So-
go. Yeah. He's younger, so you
Yeah.
can get that.
So, but let's talk about the new normal. What was going through your mind about your, what you were thinking about your physical limitations and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I went from a moment of pretty much independent all these years, doing things on my own, to a moment of almost complete dependence for mobility, for a lot of things. Obviously, I can't prepare meals at that point. Not that I did a lot of it because Allison's a great cook, but no, there was a lot of things, and then I started worrying a little bit about my job, my career. So from a mobility standpoint, I knew things were going to be a lot different, but I didn't know how long. And that was really, I got to a moment where I was in the wheelchair. It'd been probably 3 or 4 weeks, and I had a breakdown moment. It was like, hang on a minute. I wondered if I was going to be able to, because my mind started thinking, am I going to be able to give Carter and them, or my kids, or whatever, if I have grandkids, rather, am I going to be able to play with them? Am I going to be able to do part of what I used to do? Because very athletic, I've always tried to stay in shape. Fitness was important. Allison and I spent a lot of time together doing things like that, walking, running, whatever. And, I pretty much knew at that point I wasn't going to be running again. So just kind of it was kind of a checkpoint to really, it's kind of a reality check, I guess. And plus Woody, if y'all don't know, Woody keeps things light, right? My brother. And but he was serious one day. He said, you really messed that thing up. So yeah, it was kind of it was a difficult moment just there in the wheelchair. So but thank God I'm not in the wheelchair anymore.
So, you were concerned. You talked about, hey, I had this fear of what I'm going to be able to do physically. Am I going to be, what's life going to be like? But also, you also share with me, too, your concern about your career. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I am a sales rep, a broker for a company out of Ohio, and I would say half of my time is spent on the road, visiting customers and clients and things like that. So I had to call my boss and say, hey, man, I can't walk anymore. I can't drive. There's a lot that I wasn't going to be able to do. And then I kind of a key accounts manager, so I called all my customers, and I let them know what was going on. And everyone was super supportive. In fact, thanks to the good Lord right now. I mean, honestly, it's been a great year for us. So people have been very gracious. So I learned a lot about that. I also learned that I was probably spending too much time. The customers were like, look, you don't have to be here this much, and we can do a lot. Thanks to technology, we can do a lot. So it was an interesting kind of epiphany, I guess you'd say, to know that, number one, I had built enough trust in those customers that knew I was going to take care of their accounts, even while I was at home. So, and I'm grateful that that God allowed me to go through this, because it kind of solidifies a lot of things. I think a lot of us live in fear of the unknown, and the reality of it is it's all unknown. We don't really control half of what we think we control. The movie Evan Almighty, I always go back to that. It's such a great line when he says, that's not my plans. And then Morgan Freeman's playing God, and he starts laughing. He said, your plans. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's a verse, and it far better than I about, we have plans in our heart.
That man makes plans in his heart, the Lord determines his steps.
Exactly. Or his fall. So there you go.
Yep.
God determined my fall.
Talking about control, I remember when I was in my 20s, I went to a conference, and there's a guy named Larry Crabb who was speaking, and he said, it dawned on him one day, and it's just stuck with me, is when he was looking in the mirror and he realized, I don't control much, and what I do control doesn't matter much. And so I think we all sometimes live with the illusion that we control all these things, but the great news is that we have an incredibly sovereign God who's at work even in our difficulties, and that as we go through these things, that he has a great plan. Not everything that we go through is good, but he is good, and he brings about good from those difficulties. And it's not always easy. One of the things that you and I were discussing that I think is relevant to all of our lives is we all have a measure of brokenness. It might not be our foot, but we have this measure of brokenness, and that the injury, the accident, the issue that you're going through, the moment that something gets broken, that hurts. But there's also pain in the healing process. So, physically you learn that lesson. I think there's parallels with us spiritually and mentally. So would you talk about just what you've gone through the healing process to this point?
Yeah, so, initially one concern I had was dependency on narcotics, because when I broke my foot, they were saying, look, you're going to have narcotics. And I was like, I really don't want those because I've seen too many lives, affected by it. As an employer, as a fellow employee, that kind of thing, people get hurt at work. So when I met with the surgeon, that was actually the first thing I asked her. It wasn't really about the procedure. And she told me about their pain management process, and Alice and I felt really comfortable about it. So we went with that, and honestly, guys, within probably 10 days, I didn't really have to have any more. There were a couple of nights that, were really bad, but thankfully Motrin, ibuprofen, switching those up with Tylenol, it took care of a lot of the pain. So physically, that part wasn't so bad, I guess, except for the first night.
Yeah.
So they had told me I was going to be in the hospital for 3 days. Well, the first night after the surgery, a young doctor, Shands is a great hospital, by the way, University of Florida, Gainesville. If you have a trauma injury, go to Shands. But they had one young kid. He came in there and he said, hey, man, right now it's just pain management. So if you feel like you can go home, Nora, you can go home. So I was like, hey, that's a great thing. I'm ready to go home.
You're like, I'm going.
So 12 o'clock rolls around. He had been there about 9 o'clock that night, and 12 o'clock rolls around, and the nurse comes in and says, hey, you want your pain medicine? I was like, no, I got this. Because I had a nerve block and everything else. Well, I woke up about 2 hours later, and I'm trying to kick that button, right? Because this is bad. And the nurse comes in, and she's like, hey, can I help you? I was like, yeah, I'll take that medicine now. She goes, I'm sorry, sir, but you can't have medicine until 5. You elected not to take it. And I was like, this is not good. So somebody asked me, well, what did it feel like? And I'd sit there for 3 hours. I can tell you exactly what it felt like. It felt like somebody took a lead pipe and busted my heel from the bottom. Then they parked the car on top of my foot and set a fire underneath it. That's about what it felt like. So
it hurt?
It hurt a little bit. But anyway, so, okay, all right. So then I don't have medication, right? So I'm saying, okay, God, you got to help me with this. And I would sit there, and then I'd look up at the clock and be like, okay, that was 90 seconds, and I still got 2.5 hours of this mess. But no, in the midst of it all, I can tell you this: he was definitely there with me, even with that. It was excruciating, but I didn't miss any medicine after that. I promise you that. So.
Thank God for medicine.
Thank God for medicine.
So one of the things that I think you have learned, I think would be good for all of us, is you talked to me about the people in your life and around you who rallied around you to help you through this time. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was incredible. I had a brother-in-law who had a wheelchair ramp built probably 18 hours after, I had the accident, which was incredible. He was not even going to go to the wedding. He was trying to finish, and I was like, no, man, I can crawl up the steps for a day. So, but that was pretty amazing having him right there at the moment. You were at the gym that same day, and I'm in there in the ER, and Chris walks in, and I'm like, hey, man, I didn't even know I was here. So
I got sources.
Yeah. So you guys better be careful. He's got sources.
And I'm just thankful you were okay with me because I was finishing my workout, and you were good with me coming in.
Oh, yeah.
In gym shorts and
it's
stuff
all
like
good.
that. So
that's kind of interesting. We'll talk a little bit about that probably a little bit later. But no, there was, of course, my mom came, my sister, all my family was there, which was incredible. And Allison has been amazing through it all. My wife, I met her 27 years ago, and we got married the following year, and always been very intentional about our relationship, making sure we have date nights, trying to celebrate the little things. We had one income with 3 children, so We didn't always have a lot to go to the movies and stuff like that, but we always made it fun. And over the years, you grow and appreciate that person more. I mean, when you first meet someone, you're enamored with them, and you get married and everything's wonderful. And then, job comes and children come and all that, and so it has a tendency to eat away at the joy that you had to start with. So I think you really you want to be intentional about your relationship, especially your marriage, and make it super important. Make it the most important thing, because one day it was, right. You had a wedding one day, so it was the most important thing. So value that relationship and build on it and nurture it, and when kids get involved, make sure that you love them as much as you can. We always were trying to. You need to try to find out what your kid is into and fuel it. Invest in it. If they like hunting, join a club. If they like piano, make sure they got a piano in your house. It'll pay dividends later on. It may hurt to start with, and you may not get to do a few things you want to do, but you had your kids, you need to invest in them and love them unconditionally, even when they are 15 to 21. But because we've all been there, right? My mom can probably attest to that too. So, but no, just phenomenal family support, and we'll talk more about Allison and I later.
Well, you can talk about it now.
Yeah. So
it's your story.
One of the breakdown moments was I was in the wheelchair, like I told you earlier. Didn't I say that in this service?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I don't know how he does it 2 services. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, man. He's like, man, I already said that. But no, that was 2 hours ago. But no, she was doing everything. And tireless, just middle of the night, she'd get up and help me. She kept my medicine straight, which is phenomenal. I mean, I would have probably been laid on the floor somewhere. I'd taken the wrong stuff. But she knew all about how to do that, kept a good log, and just day in, day out, stayed very, very positive. Like we said, the new normal. I mean, she never batted an eye. And we look back and it's like, wow, we got through that. We got through this step. You're out of the wheelchair now. Now you're in the crutch. We're doing this. And then it's just a natural progression for healing, but it was a lot on her too. So.
Well, when we get married, all of us who are married have experienced this. You say vows. Well, I promise to. I don't know what yours were, but I know ours. Well, I know one sentence in ours. I promise not to be irritable or rude with you in our conversations. And so that's been a hard one for me with and so, but you think about those vows, many of you probably had some sort of, I promise to love you in sickness and health. And that's Allison keeping that vow, but also always think about it, and also being loving while you are sick or in pain. It can be difficult, but she's, your testimony is how faithful she's been with you throughout the process.
Yeah, I mean, it was never begrudging either. I mean, every task at hand or whatever, it was, it wasn't seasoned always with super joy, but I mean, she was never negative. I'm serious, and she kept me very positive the whole time. So, yeah, I don't know really what to say other than that I still love you, baby, and I'm glad you still love me. With no hair and 1 foot.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things that you mentioned to me that you learned through the process. The first thing that you said was you learned about the need to slow down.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we all are like this. We develop a life. You create a life for yourself, or at least you think you do. And so you're in your zone doing your thing, and you got it on cruise control. But yeah, you
slow down.
Thank you. Slow down.
Slow down.
I was rambling, so I wasn't slowing down. No, but I think we miss a lot of opportunities. Truthfully, we have things. We get up, we have our tasks, we know what we're going to do that day, or our jobs require this, and we don't realize the people who are in front of us. Sometimes we don't realize that someone's hurting. We don't realize that they're maybe their spouse, they're having problems with their spouse, or they have a death in the family, and we kind of just glide through our day doing our own thing and not aware of what's going on around us. And, so there's that, and there's also the whole spiritual paradigm. If we fill our lives and we're so busy that we don't have time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want to call it, that's good for you to spend with God, how are we even going to know that he's there for us? If we're just, and it's easy this day and time with your phone. I mean, it's like, Okay, I'm going to check on Instagram. And what happens, 5 or 10 minutes later, I'm still checking Instagram, or something like that. So, yeah, I think we get really, really busy, and I think we forget ultimately why we're here.
I learned something new. I didn't know you're that big on Instagram, but
I'm not big on Instagram,
okay.
but I was when I couldn't walk. So,
well, I had a guy tell me back when I was a teenager, if Satan can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And I think that's kind of what you're kind of communicating to us is that, we all need to slow down. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't slow ourselves down. And we can be intentional about slowing ourselves down, but sometimes God doesn't leave us that choice. He slows us down. And
or makes us fall.
Or makes us fall off a tree.
I'm kidding. He didn't make me
fall. But, it impacts your life because we all need to slow down. We live very busy lives. And I think keeping busy keeps us from the most important things. And on top of that, I think one of the things you've discovered about being slowed down, I think it's important for us, is you talked about, the word you used was connection, making connection with people around you. Yeah. So would you talk about that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned and shared with other people, other patients and things like that is, we are all kind of going through life on different paths, and every now and then, our paths interconnect. And I don't think it's by accident any day of the week. I think things are, whether it's a patient of yours or it's a colleague of yours or it's a friend or whatever, there's a reason we're in their lives. There's a reason that we are even remotely engaged with them, and so finding those moments, and you got to be kind of sensitive about it, and you got to be intentional about it, but people want to know that you care. And that's one thing that I've noticed at physical therapy. I get to see several different people now there that I would never have come into contact with. And that includes the physical therapist, his assistants, all that. So having that opportunity to engage with them is pretty unique. So, I try to ask about their family, or things right. like that. And it creates moments or opportunities to show that, hey, man, I care about what's going on in your life. And I think that's what people want to know is that you care.
Yeah, maybe the good word you and I have talked about is being present. Being present with the people that are actually, and sometimes we're present physically, but we're not present mentally, emotionally. And I think what God would have us to do is to be more present in the lives of the people around us, whether they're our spouse or our kids. You talked about just in our previous conversation, just about making sure that you are tuned in and being present in the life of your kids, because time flies, and those moments are important for us, is that we, they have our attention. Anything else you want to say about that?
I would say that basically I lost my dad 12 years ago, and almost 13 now, but anyway, you always want one more day with the people that you love. And so you really need to invest. If it's just a few moments, you need to invest every day in them. I know that when I was traveling so much, I really didn't have the opportunity or didn't take the opportunity with Allison or Evie or, now Roxana's with us and stuff. And so having that time now because I'm home, we eat together, we eat lunch together. And just those small moments, it doesn't have to be big things, but just taking the time to engage with them and find out, okay, what's going on in your life. And I think that's really it. Talk about being present. Being present requires energy. It requires effort. It requires being intentional. I say that over and over again, but it does. I think for guys, there's, it's kind of funny. Somebody says, well, hey, man, what are you thinking? I'm like, I'm not thinking about anything, because guys don't think about anything normally, right? They really don't. And but no, I would encourage young men to be intentional with your brides. Okay, it's important to know that you love them unconditionally, that you love them no matter what, and that you will protect them and you will fight for them no matter what. And
going back to, the people around us need us, and we need them. And so when you look around the room here, you need the people here in your life, and guess what? They need you in their life. It's a body. We're working together, and it's easy to forget that. I think one of the biggest traps that Satan has for us is to isolate us. And we get isolated, that we get in very vulnerable places. If you isolate, an animal from a pack, it's more vulnerable. And so I think even from the beginning, when Adam and Eve fell into sin, what was their first initial response? Was to isolate themselves and move away. And so I think through this, one of the things that, threads I see that you, in our conversations that I've been picking up, is that, connection's important. Isolation is not what we need. Obviously, we need to be along with God at times, but he sends people in our life to help us, which will get to the next question. When you were laying in the hospital, I stopped by. I don't know if it was a Demerol talking or was it actually you, but yeah, I've known you quite.
We'll wait to see what you say, then I'll tell you which one it was.
Yeah. So, but you made a comment about you didn't think you were that tough, and I was like, I've always thought you to be a pretty tough dude, and so I was like, I think you're a lot tougher than you think. But I think it goes to the fact that sometimes we are able to give grace to people, but we're very prideful, and receiving grace can be hard. How was it for you to receive from other people, where here it is, you're in a wheelchair, you're used to being the person who serves. Mm-hmm. What was it like to be on the other end?
I would say it's pretty eye-opening to see that if you do take the time to invest in someone in need, and to be on that receiving end, for people to make sacrifices to care for you, to make sacrifices to prepare a meal, to call you, to visit you, whatever it is. When you see people genuinely concerned, it's like it's a whole other element, because a lot of times we're engaged on a very superficial level. Most times we are. But when you see someone dig a little deeper, it's pretty humbling, truthfully. I mean, people who you would never expect. Robbie and Tedeka show up the night after my surgery, and he's got this super cool device that you wrap your leg around, and it shoots cold water through your legs and kept the swelling down. So, I could list 100 people, right now that help, but that one came to mind only because I do need to get it back to you, so I will. And he brought me a weight bench, which was super cool too. So, no, but it's really humbling, I guess, is the main thing.
Well, that was actually one of the statements that you made when we were talking about what God's been doing. I thought was really interesting, because the question I asked you, was it hard for you to receive from people? And your answer, well, it wasn't hard, but it was humbling. Right. And I think that's part of life, is that sometimes we don't want to be helped because we like to be independent. We like to be self-dependent. But the reality of it is God has sent people in your life to help you, and that God often is working through the people in your life. Where's God? Well, that's God. It's through his body. It's through people made in his image, through people who follow Jesus, that I think he works a lot of times and tries to help us.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cliche, but I mean, definitely we are the hands and feet of God and Jesus. I mean, and we're here on the ground. We need to be, if we're prompted to do something, we need to do it. I guess it's as simple as that.
So what have you learned about trusting God in this?
I learned that I wasn't trusting him near enough, truthfully. I was trusting in my own ability. Always been a kind of guy that picks yourself up by the bootstraps and keep moving them forward. But to know that, I guess to know the moment that it happened, that he had that moment, and then to see that he's really got our moment every day. It's kind of humbling. It's kind of fascinating to know that the creator of the universe wants a moment of your day, or more than one moment of your day. And I think we need to realize that as creative beings, because I think a lot of times we're just on our own in our own vein. But the reality is we're not, and He's always there, and He just wants some time.
And I'm going to steal from the first service. You made a really great quote. I told you I'd preach this sometime, so I'm going to preach it now.
Go for it.
I asked Greg earlier about his trust, and he said, I know I trust God for eternity, but sometimes I don't trust Him for today. That's a great quote. I'm going to preach that. So that's good stuff. I mean, because really that's where we live a lot of times. It's like,
right.
I know you got that because that's the big thing. I'll die, go to be with you. But like today, right now in my stuff, He's there. You trust Him. I think that's a really powerful truth. Let's talk about ministry for a second. All of us have people in our lives that are going through difficulties. And what advice would you give us in how we can better minister to those around us who are going through difficulties, whether it be emotional, physical, or whatever they're going through? How can we be better in ministry?
How can we be better in ministry? Well, number one, you got to be present, like we talked about. Number two, I think you have genuine concern. But the other thing I think we all need to realize is that God is not surprised when we're going through hard times. And from a ministry standpoint, if we're prompted to visit someone or to write a letter or something like that, that's the ministry that we need to be involved in and engaged in, because otherwise that letter doesn't get written. That letter of encouragement doesn't get written. It doesn't get heard. And we need other people's perspective, because a lot of times we're not right. I should have listened to Allison. Well, if I'd asked her, hey, should I go do this? She'd probably say, no, just come on home. But operating in our own strength, it can get us in trouble.
Yeah. So if we are present, then we'll be available. Because I think that's when sometimes we think people don't really need us and they don't really care. It really won't matter. But I think being present and being available to do what the Spirit prompts us to do is part of the ministry that we've called to. And I mean, I know we're busy and we got all this stuff going on, but it's just being available that can make the difference sometimes.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about building margin in your life. If every moment is consumed, if you got every moment planned out, then you're really not open to what might be happening around you. And I think that's really, I think we're called to be sensitive to those around us. I think that's really it in a nutshell. And be, like you said, be available. And you don't have to know all the answers. You just have to show them that you care, and then the rest can kind of take care of itself.
Go back before we, start wrapping up. The impact on your marriage. You and I were talking about your relationship with Allison and how it's gone deeper through all of this. You kept bringing up the fact of how many times y'all have found yourself, even in pain, laughing.
Yeah, it was, yeah, you're right. Interestingly enough, so we actually found out that we do like each other. We spend a lot of time together, but we do like each other. And no, you need to be able to laugh at yourself. And a funny story. So I'm 49. Most of you guys who are over 45 knows that you probably have to get up in the middle of the night, go to the restroom. Well, when I was in a wheelchair, I always had my little urinal there, and that was no big deal. But I'm kind of prideful, and now that I can walk, I want to get myself up and go to the bathroom. But my feet hurt, so I have to wear tennis shoes. So I'm walking through there with the crutch, hobbling through the bedroom, and I hear some laughter in the bed. And Allison's like, I am not going to get that image out of my head. So anyway, yeah, it's funny. There's a ton of stories like that.
So
I mean, some of them I can't repeat, but anyway, It's
well, it's funny because I do think the reason I brought that up is because I think that's, like you said, I think sometimes when you're married and even in just your regular relationships, you say you love somebody, but you don't like them. And part of that evidence, the fruit of that, I think, is being able to laugh at each other. And I think sometimes we're so serious with each other, we don't laugh. And we don't laugh at ourselves because I think we get too prideful.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because we're capable of hurting the people that we love that are closest to us. We hurt them the most. So I think we can also give them the greatest joy. And laughing and not taking things too seriously, I think, is a big part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we want to end here. So we talk about Grace Point. We talk about glorifying God. We want to make God look good. So what have you discovered about how to glorify God even when things are hard, even when things are difficult, even when things are painful? Or what are some things you say, these are the things I've learned, that God is going to be glorified even in this?
Well, I think the biggest thing, in terms of glorifying God, I think a big part of that is just gratitude, realizing that no matter the circumstances that you're in, He's still in control, whether it's fighting cancer, whatever. He's got a plan. And I think that we need to be, it's odd to say this, but be grateful for whatever moments we're in. It's easy to be grateful in the good moments, but being grateful in the moments that aren't so great, I think shows Him that we trust Him. And I think that's really, it shows others that we trust Him too. I mean, I can see it every day at physical therapy when I go. I mean, some people don't have hope, and you kind of almost know they don't know the Lord. Yeah. And it's an opportunity at that point. So
we, pursuing gratefulness. Another thing that you mentioned to me that you've learned through that is, which when you said it, it struck me. I was like, I didn't expect you to say that. But you talked about the fact that you felt like you've learned how to glorify God by displaying your faith in your obedience to Him. Would you say a little bit about that?
Well, I think that ultimately we show the Lord that we love Him by obeying. We talk about obeying His commands and that kind of thing like that. So, yeah, it's a little bit more difficult. I think the older you get, if you haven't been obedient at a young age, you kind of get in your own deal, and it's difficult to be obedient in your older years. And although sometimes I think you can mellow out too, but honestly, I think that the simplicity of the gospel, knowing Jesus, loving, accepting Him, and that kind of thing, and then coupling that with obedience, is really what we're called to do.
We're really running out of time, but I do appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you.
And I want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything maybe we've left out that, I know we've talked about so many things. Is there anything that is coming to mind that you would say you'd like to share with us? And there may not be. I'm just want to.
Well, I know a lot of people have been praying, so thank you guys for praying. I can tell you that today I'm probably almost a month ahead from what I can gather from my physical therapist. The bone actually is healing correctly. She was very concerned about the arch of the bone. All that's going well, so I just thank you for your prayers, and I thank the Lord that I'm able to get up and get around. So
that's
just grateful.
Yeah. So would you, just by clapping your hands, let Greg know you're thankful for him getting up here and doing this? Thank you. Thank you. You want me to help you down the step? Okay. So, we want to make this a regular thing where we just share a story. So if you have a story you want to share, don't know, we've already started filling up the lineup, but I think what the goal in this is that you would be encouraged, but you would also, I know Greg would be willing to talk to you, share with you more. He would tell you that being on stage is not what he wanted to get up here with a microphone, but I'm thankful that he did. I think you are as well. But it's so encouraging to hear real life people. He's probably don't have a book written about him or anything like that. But, you are on live stream now and you're on YouTube, so your story's out there. But look, God has a plan for all of our lives, and that plan is to make Him look good. And so He's at work, even when you don't think He is, and you don't know what He's doing. He can take even the worst things in our life and bring good about them. So we celebrate that. We're thankful for what God's doing in Coffee County and what God's doing in Coffee County through people like you. I'm going to pray, and then our worship team will come and lead us on. Father, thank you for just an incredible morning that the gospel is preached through our lives and through our experiences, that you are at work with your grace for your glory and for our good. And so we praise you for that. And Father, we pray for your continued healing on Greg. We thank you for the whole Woodward family and just the opportunity for them to pour into our lives and for us to pour into their lives. And Father, would you grow this family at Grace Point, not so that we can be patted on the back and say, what a big church, but so that we can be a part of what you're doing in this county. We know that you're doing great things, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. And so we want to honor you, and we know that you are here with us even in our brokenness and in our pain. And we cry out to you